Professor Rothen, thank you for coming to our Congress and presenting.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. It's great to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
And we'll jump right in with the first question. Why did you decide to study psychology?
Yeah, before I actually studied psychology, I was very curious about what's going on when something goes wrong in the human brain, and that's what has driven me to start to study psychology. That's basically it.
Wrong with your brain or wrong with other people's brain?
With the brain in general, I mean, with my brain at the time, nothing was wrong, or I mean, even now, um, I think and hope. But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what can happen when things go wrong in the human brain, and that's what I found so interesting, and that has driven me to start and study psychology.
So you focus a lot on like what's wrong. So was that also like part of your university time, the clinical aspect?
A little bit. Soon after studying psychology, I actually started to find things more interesting when how things work and not when things go wrong. I was much more driven than by how does memory work, for instance, because without memory we don't have an identity. We would only exist in the very moment, but being able to memorize things gives us also a past, an identity, and so on. And that's then what started to interest me and what became more interesting. And that's how I went on. So I really went into memory studies, and I still am in the field of memory.
So was that also where you did your PhD in?
Yeah, my PhD was basically on what makes a good memory. So I got interested, why do have some people better memories than other people? And that's what I'm still studying today.
And can you give us students a couple of tips for a better memory?
When it comes to learning, studying material, then I mean, you probably already know you should study regularly, not just before the exam, but you should also try and make sense of what you're studying. Reading a book multiple times is easy, but it doesn't help with memorizing things, so it's not very sustainable. What you should try and do is to explain things to a colleague, or maybe simplify things so that you're trying to explain it to your grandmother or a sibling, and that also helps to organize what you're trying to learn. And at the same time, when you're organizing stuff, you're embedding it in the structures which already exist in your memory, so the knowledge structures that you already have. And with that, learning becomes very sustainable.
Thank you. As an expert of memory, what is something you learned that's not yet general knowledge or often overlooked?
Often overlooked, well, difficult to say. I mean, I'd like to come back to the previous question, because very often I have the impression that students sometimes don't believe that it really helps and is less time consuming in the end if you distribute learning, if you take the pain to actually understand it, if you summarize things, if you explain them in your own words, basically when you're practicing retrieval from your memory, because that's what you also need during an exam. You need to retrieve, so you should practice retrieval. And I think very often the easier way is just to read one's own notes or the book multiple times, and there I would really like to insist, okay, start to train retrieval, because that's what makes the difference.
Actually, my friend behind the camera, when he studied for the exam, were like 75% people fall through. How many flashcards did you generate?
I think I had like 8,000 with my tall friend Paul. We collected them, and then we just studied the 8,000 cards for the whole semester, or for the whole year actually, of the assessment. So also for me, like retrieval was the factor, like to pass and to study and to learn and to have fun.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most powerful learning principles that we have: distributing and retrieving.
So research proved.
Yeah, that's what research shows and consistently shows, and it's these are things that easily replicate as well. So, I mean, now in these times where people talk about the replication crisis and so on, I mean, these two effects, the retrieval practice effect, so that things are better remembered when they're retrieved. And the distributed learning, I mean, these are two very powerful effects in long-term memory, and that it replicates very easily. So I can only encourage every student to learn with these techniques. And he's the man behind the camera is the living proof of that.
So now with your knowledge about learning, how would you rate yourself as a student when you were young?
Well, I think maybe two things. There were things that interested me more and things which interested me less. So it was obviously easier to engage with things which I was interested in. And once you're interested in things, you also become interested in details. You disentangle different things, and you compare different theories, and you try and see which data goes along with which theory, and so on. So this automatically also enhances learning and memory in general. But there were also things I just became less interested. For instance, the clinical aspects, which at the beginning actually have driven me into studying psychology, but then in the end I realized, okay, that's not what I find interesting. I don't want to become a psychotherapist, but I want to become a memory researcher.
Nice, nice. So maybe as a last question, besides starting with retrieval, what would be your tip for a student trying to be more efficient with memorizing?
I guess more like it's a general tip. I think you also need breaks. You also need good hours of sleep to consolidate what you've learned. Yeah, that's I guess what I would give as an additional tip.
Thank you for your time, and we're looking forward for your talk.
Thank you very much.